Welcome to Bible for Overcomers. So today I wanted to just speak on envy. And you have envy and you have jealousy. What is the difference? Well, usually, at least for me, envy is when you are desirous, you are coveting, you are wanting something that someone else has. So usually it's in a material sense, but not always. And we'll discover that in a minute. Whereas jealousy usually is envy on steroids. It's more of a direct threat. For example, you are jealous because there's a coworker that potentially could take your spot, or you are jealous because someone is paying attention to your significant other. But let's talk about envy. And in the book of Proverbs, we see in Proverbs 27. I just want to read two verses very quickly. Proverbs 27 and verse 4, wrath is cruel and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? Envy can lead to a lot of problems. The Bible says it is, I think in Proverbs 4, it says that envy is rottenness to the bones. It literally will just eat you alive, just like needing vengeance. You know, the Count of Monte Cristo story, which I actually like, by the way, that story. But if vengeance becomes your whole motivating factor, it will eat at you. It will eat at you. When people say, well, that's a good motivator, well, maybe it's a motivator, but it is a motivator that is literally eating you. It is not strengthening you. Wanting more joy every day is a tremendous motivator, for me anyway, and that is absolutely doing wonders for my health, for anyone's health who seeks joy. So there's different kinds of motivators. But also in Proverbs 27, so who is able to stand before before envy? And in verse 20 of that same proverb, it says, hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. And that's true, right? Because when you think about it, people get envious of their neighbors, envious of their coworkers, envious because their friends have a supposedly more successful husband or wife, or prettier, whatever. So we're never satisfied. I mean, you could take some of us and put us back 1,000 years, or even today in certain cultures, in certain places of the world, and we would be jealous because our neighbor, was able to buy a new ox cart, or had, 10 more sheep in their field than we did. And you take those same people and you put them into a first world setting, and they're jealous because their neighbor has a Cadillac Escalade or whatever. So it's like the eyes of man are never satisfied. So we always have to guard against this business with coveting, but specifically about envying others for their positions, for their power, for their material goods. So let's just talk about two examples in the scriptures. Well, in Numbers 16, you had a rebellion against Moses in the wilderness wanderings, and there was three members, Dathan. Let me turn there. I'm going to get the names wrong. Kohath, Dathan, and Abiram. These three Levites. Now remember, Levi's already a chosen tribe because they were to provide all the priests. They became jealous of Moses, and so they, got a rebellion against him. And why were they jealous? Why were they envious? Well, because they said Moses had taken too much power to himself. Well, God had showed that at that particular point in time, Moses was his man to lead them through the wilderness wanderings and into the promised land. No, it's not fair, but that's the way it was. That's the way God decided to do it at that particular point in time. But they were envious of his power, of Moses' power, and so they formed a rebellion. And if you read it, it says that eventually there was a showdown. Well, very quickly there was a showdown, and the earth opened up and swallowed these individuals and their households. So envy was definitely rottenness to the bones, even more so. Literally got swallowed up. And then in the material sense, in 1 Kings 21, there's the story of Ahab and his very strong wife, Jezebel. And Ahab was coveting, he was envious of his neighbor, and he wanted that vineyard that his neighbor owned. And so the man's name was Naboth. Naboth owned this vineyard, and so the King Ahab, became jealous, and then he pouted because Naboth wouldn't sell it to him. And Jezebel said, "Why are you pouting? I will get that for you." And she did. And she had Naboth set up as some sort of rebellious traitor against the king, and they stoned him to death in the village that he lived. So Jezebel, and by the way, it's kind of funny because people use the term Jezebel as a loose woman, a woman with a real high body count, but yet Jezebel, you don't see that in her life as much as you see that she was willing to murder. She was willing to do anything for power, and that's really what she was about. So there's been kind of a misconception on Jezebel. But anyway, this business with envy, both envying someone's power, position, as happened for Moses, or envying somebody for their material goods, the vineyard that Naboth had. Whatever it is, like I said, workplace, relationships, whatever, envy is not going to help you. It's not going to be productive. And in fact, it can be incredibly counterproductive and tragic for your life. Not just your spiritual walk, but for your life as well. So let us always be on guard against envy. Let's read the book of Proverbs more and more so that we can start to identify these things, realize the dangers that they present, because him or her that think that they stand, take heed lest you fall. So any of us, if we think we're strong in our faith and that these things can't be an issue, it's a daily battle. It's a daily struggle, and we are to be watchmen over our own souls, our own lives first, because these things can come up and get into our spirits and get into our lives, and not only damage us, but damage those around us. So envy, coveting, jealousy. Let's be on guard for these things. That's all I got. Be blessed.